Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. As we, the Black grassroots, continue the work of establishing what the new normal is going to be for what constitutes political discourse within our ranks, we also have to make sure that everybody understands the rules of the road. In this case, we're going to be just discussing one of them, and that is the right to ask some basic questions. Up until now, there hasn't really been any real vetting of political candidates in the Black community. Vetting, and I put that in quotes, has mostly taken the form of referrals, usually from some pulpit pimp or preacher man hustler who we don't know and, truth be told, don't trust. You got these preachers and these civil rights retreads, usually who are presented to us by the white media, and these clowns on the payroll of white power, they're the ones who introduce the puppet candidates to us. And these suck-ups vouch for these bootlicks, and they tell us that they're on the level and we're supposed to accept that, and up until now we have. And sometimes it doesn't even take that much. All that a so-called candidate needs to do is have a good line of rap to say to us, and most of us would become putty in their hands. We didn't ask serious questions because, frankly, a lot of us didn't even know what our interests are or how to express them. That's where the Black media comes in, trying to help people to understand those basic common sense truths about their own reality. And those who did know what their interests were, they usually would back down the moment that a candidate got offended, angry that we were actually vetting them. For generations now, the Black political experience has been to either be betrayed, if not just ignored completely. And many times it actually would be both. We always allow ourselves to take somebody else's word for it. Candidates don't have to answer Black folks' questions, they don't have to prove anything to us, and they don't have to promise us anything either. Well, now that's changing. We're asking questions. And if a candidate truly is one of us, then they should completely understand why that is. They should be familiar with this as well. Now, does that mean that every discussion is supposed to become the Spanish Inquisition, where all it is just question after question, almost like a child? Well, what about this? But what about this? What? Of course not. A lot of Black people, especially the ones who haven't put in any work, they're very good for trying to be armchair skeptics. Very good for trying to call themselves poking holes in any and every one who comes along, and they, of course, are not doing anything, so poking holes in things is pretty much the only skill set they've got, not that they're very good at that. All of us have our own particular idea of what would be the perfect candidate for us, but we need to be realistic, and we don't need to let the perfect become the enemy of the practical. But that kind of chattering good-for-nothing is not the kind of Black inquiry that I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is actually asking questions of a candidate and trying to figure out where they're coming from, literally. Up until now, apparently the posture has been ask no questions, I'll tell no lies. That's what the Democrats have been doing for the longest time. We've let people coerce and BS their way past us for so long that now they feel entitled to tell us they won't do anything for us. They're offended that we would even ask. You ask them questions and they start getting indignant. They start getting hostile. We have every right to ask where a person comes from, who they run with, and why we should trust them. And if the answers don't add up, so long as we're able to explain cogently and intelligently why, then that person shouldn't have a problem with it. If they're familiar with our situation, they shouldn't have a problem with it at all. See, the problem is that familiarity breeds contempt, and we've allowed the white supremacists and their Negro bootlicks to become very familiar with our insecurities and dysfunctions. We're so desperate for someone to merely not be throwing racial epithets at us that we allow people to tell us to our faces that they're not going to do anything for us. And they then tell us that if we don't vote for them, then there's something wrong with us. This is Joe Biden. Simone Sanders probably fed him that nonsense to say, if you can't decide whether or not to vote for me, then you ain't Black. Kamala Harris, you think I'm going to do something that only benefits Black people? And then what are they coming up to us saying? Vote for me. But they're not the only ones who do that. People know that they can come to us and get our vote for a song and a dance. That's why whenever Barack or Hillary held some event with a clown like Ellen or a bootlick like Roly Poly, they would just start dancing. You don't need to do anything for Black people. Black people's interests are not to be taken seriously. Just go ahead and amuse them, and these people will go along with it because that's all they deserve. Now here's where things get a little deep. White supremacy is crafty. That's how it's lasted for so long. It adapts. When it sees us putting pressure on it and the white supremacists can't stop us, they'll instead decide that if they can't beat us, then they'll try to fool us into thinking they've joined us instead. So we get some step-and-fetch-it sellouts who come to us and they'll use a few of our words, a little bit of our lingo. We're talking about the D-Ray McKessons and such. But it's just rhetorical bait. The A-dunce crowd and such, they sprinkle a little bit of what we say on the talking points they get from their white political paymasters, and then they try to tell us that they're representing our agenda when they're not. And the same goes for all these phony baloney new civil rights leaders. The white media has been trotting those clowns out since the murder of Trayvon Martin, trying to christen and calling themselves coronating some new successor to Dr. King, the new leaders of the movement, etc., etc. And these bootlicks are the recipients of a big splashy white media introduction. They've even done the talk show circuit. Go ahead and give them some charitable write-ups in the magazines and online. You want to make them prominent, because if you make them prominent, hopefully that will be a form of instant legitimacy. Because people will have seen them and at least they'll know the person's name. They won't know who the white money is propping them up and promoting them, but they will know at least the person's face and their name. That's how you got Daniel Cameron out in Kentucky, that scumbag, who rigged the grand jury and instructed them not to indict the murderers of Breonna Taylor, and now he's running for governor. Now, of course, he's not going to black people for anything, but guess what? There'll be some black folks dumb enough to vote for him and decide to give themselves an excuse why it's okay. So let's make sure that we're all on the same page about this reality. If you come to black people wanting their vote, just understand black people don't owe it to you. Now, nobody expects anyone to wait years and years trying to reassure and convince every single person to a T that they're on the up and up and you got to answer a million questions. That's never been the case in the black community, and nobody expects anyone to do that anyway. But the issue is we've gotten a bad reputation for being a people who are easily impressed. Our reputation is that we don't want to seem inhospitable to strangers. So instead, we become deferential and we tolerate any treatment from people, and then we make excuses about how it's not so bad, and we pretend like that's the best that we can get, when the truth is we've never stuck to our guns and demanded any better before now. I said it many years ago in We're All Detroiters Now, every other constituency makes it clear the candidate must satisfy their doubts. It's not the job of the voters to convince the candidate that he should represent them. It's the duty of the candidate to convince the voters that he will do what he said on the campaign trail. And before anyone goes getting upset, ask yourself how much better off we would have been had we made solid demands and stuck to our guns when it came to people like Roosevelt before giving him our vote. Or if we made demands of Kennedy and vetted him completely and made it very clear we don't like some of the folks you hang around before we gave him our vote. Or the same thing with Jimmy Carter or Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or Joe Biden. For so long, we just allowed any old body to come among us and tell us they're not going to do anything for us, and then they tell us, well, you can take it or leave it, because the Republicans are even worse. Or this other candidate over here is even worse. So I've given you the only answer I'm going to give you, and yeah, I know you've told me your interests, or you've told me what your concerns are about me, but you know what, I've answered your question, so take it or leave it. And up until now, we've taken it. And look where that got us. So yes, the vetting, the questions, especially questions that are direct, even pointed, that's going to be the new normal. And yeah, we're listening to hear what you say, and we're also listening to hear the things you don't say. We're going to be asking questions about who it is that you've been bumping elbows with. And yeah, we judge people by the company they keep. Part of vetting is that, judging people by the company they keep. Because if we're asking a candidate questions, and that candidate comes up short, or they just don't have the answer, or they don't have a response to what's being asked to them, then it's time to ask why that may be the case. Whatever they think the hot button issue is for black folks at the moment, and they usually try to dictate to us what our interest should be, but whatever they think might be trending at the moment, whether it be police violence or whether it be maternal mortality or whatever it is that they think might push our buttons, they'll pretend to speak to that. And as we get on code and continue to stay on code, there's going to be more and more people who the DNC and even the Republicans on a long enough timeline are going to start trying to float amongst us for the sake of trying to see if the next Stacey Abrams wannabe is going to be able to get away with trying to abuse some of our verbiage and talking points. So yes, we've got questions, because we've been through this too many times for us to let anyone simply be able to drop a little bit of our verbiage, and now we're supposed to act like it's a brand new ball game? Now it just might be. But that is our determination to make. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Michael Johnson, Tavin Boone, Frank Den, Brian Walton, and Ron Howard. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.